Purpose Chasers, I have Bryan Falchuk on with me. Brian's going to talk about his work with the future of insurance. What led you or moved you to go all in on insurance?
So, I mean, professionally, like my career has always been insurance since I got out of undergrad. And the joke that everyone in insurance tells you is that they got in by accident, which is like the only exception is like your parents were agents. But generally speaking, no one, I shouldn't say no one, very few people are born being like, that's what I want to do. So most of us get in by accident. But that was my career. And I mean, if I really break it down, like why has that been my career and why do I do the things that I do with the books and the speaking and all this other stuff is I like fixing things. Like I like seeing opportunity that we go after. I like seeing barriers that stand in the way come down, or we find a way to not have them there anymore because we walked around them, or we found a way over or through or whatever. And you like your perception of insurance is what most people's is, including those inside, is like it's slow, it's difficult, it's boring, it's not interesting. No one wants to buy it. If you buy it, you wish you don't use it. But if you use it, you're like that's painful too. Like I don't know other products we have where like we buy it because we have to, or we're afraid if we don't. We hope we never have to use it, and we're pissed off if we don't use it because then we're spending this money for nothing. And we're kind of pissed off if we do use it because we've gone through something terrible. Like it's a losing scenario no matter how you slice it. But that also means like there's so much opportunity to be better, to take opportunity, to push forward. And that's what gets me fired up. So I've stayed in the industry the whole time. 20, this is year 26. And there's just like there's a ton to do. And that's why I'm in it. And I love it. And it's actually the same as like the do-a-day context you knew me in, is sort of like the self-help personal development. That's the same as my work in insurance. It's just the self is an entire industry or a company. If I'm one-on-one with like, a leader at a company, instead of like an individual who's struggling with their weight or their career or their relationships or, what have you. It's all the same. It's all self-help. It's all develop like personal development, no matter how you slice it.
What was the original entry point of inspiration where you were like, here's an opportunity, I'm gonna send it?
Yeah. In insurance in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that was kind of my career background. Like I got into the industry doing consulting work, so it was like go in, figure out what's broken and find a way to fix it. So that's always been kind of my path in the industry, but actually it was like writing Do a Day, and the book I wrote after that was it's a terrible title, but it's the 50, 75, 100 solution. It's like a relationship, like a dysfunctional relationship.
I was gonna say I couldn't remember the exact
Yeah.
number combination,
Nobody
but I
can.
remembered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is why like I'm not a marketing person. And shockingly, a book with a bunch of numbers in the title did not sell all that well, but it's fine. The message is powerful. But those books were structured very similarly, in terms of like introducing the concept, getting the reader to understand it personally, and then applying it to really specific like cases or situations so you can see like, oh, okay, now I get how that could change my life in that context, in that one, in that one. And you put that together, and it's like the whole notion of do a day. It's like all of these days where you're doing better creates a better life, right? And as I'm like stuck in lockdown and COVID, I had been talking to insurance companies for years about how they can do better. I had been running sales for a tech startup selling into insurance and listening to like, here's all the things that we're struggling with. But then like I'm there to talk to them about this one solution. And there's so much more I want to talk to them about. It's like, why don't I write a book about some of these case studies, like these stories I've been hearing firsthand? Let me get with those companies and be like, hey, would you tell your story in this book? And let's work through like, here's what we were facing. Here's where we got stuck. How do we move forward despite those constraints? Very similar to Do a Day, right? Like, how do we overcome the barriers we face? And then let's pull lessons out of that. And so I use the same sort of like self-help, if you will, structure and applied it to business. So there's the first book is like 700-year-old plus companies, like massive companies and smaller companies, but the smallest one's like $250 million. That's still pretty big. And they were like 117 years old. It's like old established institutions doing something different and breaking through what was holding them back. And then like what lessons can we pull out of that? And so that first book led to a second, a third, and ultimately there's a fourth. I didn't write the fourth. I just edited it and kind of saw it through. But they're all stories of like actual companies we got in firsthand and learned like where were they struggling? How did they get through that? And what lessons can we take to share with everybody so we can all do
I
better?
would ask now, like, as because you've made the correlation between, self-help and insurance, in I see it in marketing, right? Like
Yeah,
I say, like, you can't sell yourself online, because that's what marketing is. You're telling people what you are the best way you possibly can, but you can't actually put something online that you internally don't believe yourself.
totally.
Like, it
Yeah.
just doesn't work. And then when you get on a sales call, if you don't believe what you put online, now you're on a call trying to sell something you don't believe, it's a whole, it just doesn't work. Clear you are on how old the industry is and the uphill climb that you had.
Yeah. I mean, so I think all of us, and I say that in our personal context and in our work context, I don't care what industry you're in, you're going to face constraints. The constraints are self-imposed or from the outside world. And, in insurance, it's like we've got all this old technology, so our systems can't do, whatever we need them to in a modern context. And changing them is really, really hard, complicated, expensive. We got to migrate data. That never goes well. Like, the new systems are incredibly expensive. I mean, I'm talking like hundreds of millions of dollars and multiple year-long system projects. The joke I always make in the industry is you're in your 8 of your 3-year core system project, and people are like, "Oh, he's dyslexic. He got the numbers backwards." I'm like, "No, I didn't. That's where you're at. You thought it'd be 3 years, which sounded bad enough, but you're now like more than double that, and you're still not done, and you're still pouring cash into it, and your staff are still miserable, and your customers are still like everyone in the industry has lived through versions of these things. It's also a regulated industry, so while the regulators won't let us do these things, or we also need to be able to respond to every year. They'll have some other regs that come out, or there's a hurricane and then we have to respond in a certain way by law. And so you don't have the right to just do what you want to do or work on the projects you want to work on because resources are constrained. And so you have to comply with the law. So if suddenly there's a law that you must do X, well, then whatever you're working on is got to fall by the wayside because you now have to do that. But think about it. That's human life too. Like, the regulators could be your spouse, could be your parent, your teacher, your boss. Like, we all have regulators in our lives. The system constraints is like, where do you live? What do you have access to? What's your education? What's the perception of your education? Whether like your abilities are tied to that or not. It's like, are you being held back by a series of constraints that are real or self-imposed or whatever? Like, the answer is yes. And we can still move forward. And so it's like trying to look at these things. And I'm a big fan of what's called design thinking. So it's like and growth mindset. Like, they go very hand in hand, but it's the notion that you look at something that's impossible. And I would say, like, engineers do this. You should add the word for now at the end, or the words for now at the end. It's like, yeah, that's impossible for now or so far, because we just haven't figured out how to get through it yet. So we tend to think in terms of we can't because we don't have the money, we don't have the people, we don't this, we don't, the regulators will do that, our wife will yell at us, like, we can't because. And what we try to do is look at it again as like, well, how might we? So, like, what if that constraint wasn't a constraint? What if it wasn't there to hold you back? How might you do this? Because the problem is, like, if you want to look at a cost benefit, like, how much effort should I put in and what am I going to get for it? Well, when you say we can't because inherently you've said there's no benefit. I cannot, there's no upside. I can't get a new job. I can't lose the weight. I can't expand into this market or become profitable or whatever the story is. But the cost. It's going to cost us $100 million and we can't because so there's no upside. Well, great. That math doesn't work out. But how might we? Then maybe you start to see a potential upside, and then you can come back and say, like, well, is it worth it to try to get through those constraints? Because zero upside says no, don't get through the constraints. But if you discover, like, oh yeah, I could find love, or I could make $100 million and be profitable, then it might be worth trying to figure out how you get through those constraints, or maybe they're not constraints anymore. Because in dreaming and trying to solve for it, you found a path around them that you were too constrained mentally to be able to see your way through. And so it's like a different framing of things.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the biggest problem issue that you see in insurance is, the main human problem is that we see black or white, and we're so quick to say, I can't because, I can't
Yeah,
because. I
yeah,
say it all the time. I can't because I have 2 kids. I can't because, I can't because, I
totally.
can't because.
Yeah, yeah, it's all of us. And insurance, I think, and I think every industry or every relationship or person, whatever, will have their own version of this, but insurance is inherently super risk averse. And so as a result, like I certainly am because I've been in this industry, like it's ingrained in you the way it's like the nature versus nurture kind of thing. Nature is, all of the like the regulatory constraints and whatever. It's like it's the rules you have to play in, but the nurture is like we go around buying risk from people. That's what you do when you get insurance policies. You're selling your risk to an insurer that they pay for it if it goes wrong. So people are like, oh, you love risk. You go around buying it, but we don't. We hate it. When you buy an insurance policy, it's got all these definitions and stipulations and constraints and deductibles and limited, like all of these things that are basically like, this risk is scary. We got to box it in and make it as certain as we possibly can, which actually means we're very scared of risk because risk is what can blow us up. So that is how we tend to look at the world. And you see this around you with people who are more pessimistic or people who, are afraid of this one thing or have a fear of heights and like, well, what if the plane falls out of the sky? Okay, and then there's other people who like, we'll go skydiving. Like the plane's not going to fall out. I'm going to fall out of the plane. It's the same situation. They've just framed it differently because of that's like the nurture side of it. And so, like you said, it's a human thing. Like this isn't specific to any industry. It just happens to be the industry where I, have grown up professionally. And so that was really the difference in the last time we talked to today is I think I was fighting admitting this is where my place is and seeing it as a constraint. And instead, what I realize is it's not a constraint, it's actually a garden. I can grow and I can nurture here. Like I'm as much a plant as I am like the gardener. If I focus in on my niche where I have a reason to be here and for people to be like, oh yeah, he knows his stuff, I can have tremendous impact. And when I was trying to deny that, I was trying to fit into places that like, it's not that I didn't have a good message or it didn't connect with some people, but there was a lot of other people who had seemingly better reasons to be the experts in that space. And that's fine. And I was like, trying to kind of get up out of the water to catch my breath. And I couldn't. There's nothing wrong with having your niche and focusing on it and having tremendous impact in there.
Bryan, insurance being such an old industry where you're talking about 100+ year old businesses that have just
Yeah.
been doing this, that are the grandfathers or the OG of doing it. When you finally get somebody or a company of that, age and tenure away from that black or white thinking into an expansive place, can you talk about what you've seen take place in their businesses and in their lives?
Yeah. It is really cool talking to the staff. Like, yes, their financial performance should show some of the impact, and that's fine. But for me, it's like talking to the people and the people who were there before and through that. And I had one company in particular that I've been really lucky to get to know pretty in depth. And like, I came out and spoke at one of their board meetings and had them in the book. They're over 100 years old. They're actually a part of the state government in California. It's the state's workers' compensation insurer. And I mean, it's like everything you would expect if you want to be like, oh, these kinds of companies are going to be really like locked in and like their staff's all unionized. When people are like, oh, we need to do a technology or like efficiency project. Well, union's not going to like that. And it could mean less employment and like training and, all like the stereotypes come out. Their staff are all like civil servants. So like whenever I meet a company, it's like, oh, we can't because, our staff XYZ. I'm like, really? Look at these guys. State employees, unionized, over 100 years old. No one can lose their job because they're like whatever you want. Like you have politics, they have corporate politics, but they have actual politics. Um, the change in like the culture and the energy at the company is unreal. So like you can't talk to people there without just getting totally jazzed up. It's awesome. And one of the stories I love to tell about them is like it's not the most inspiring per se, but I think it gets to the heart of the matter of how much people can change and how much they're all like in it, rowing in the same direction and trying to do as much as they can possibly do to make things better. So every single member of staff did design thinking training. And they had I think they call it like experience by design or something, but everyone like people answering the phones through to, the CEO, like everybody. And so they all got kind of taught on how to think this way and think about like how might we, and to structure those investigations and to create like paper prototypes and move fast and try things out before you're, stuck in this kind of lock-in. And they did a lot of very major and cool business transformation kind of things. But the thing that I always share is like COVID hits. They had no remote work. Everyone had a desktop with like, big monitors and they all worked in the office. And obviously, you can't do that. And California was one of the early states to really like lock down. Everyone's going to go home. So they had to figure out like, what do we do about this? Because we don't have laptops we can give people. We don't have like Citrix and they can all log in remotely if they have their own computer. So people took their desk chairs, went in and they went in shifts and took their like big honking desktop computers and keyboards and mouse and monitors, put them on the chairs so they could wheel them out to their cars because it was too heavy to hold. And they like took turns wheeling them out into the parking lot, put them in their cars to bring them home so they could all continue to serve their customers. And that's a like, how do we solve this kind of moment that I think is really, really cool and really powerful. And like it's not the most technologically advanced thing. It just goes to show like everyone is kind of like, what can we do to make this better? And they figure something out. And they, like it's like Apollo 13. Like, how do we save the ship with just these few things that we have on board? Like they kind of had that moment of how might we? Even when it's like, well, we can't all get laptops. Like, no, but you get a chair. It's got wheels. You can push. Maybe we can figure this out. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, but not, not an impressive achievement, but it's kind of cool.
I think it's a massive achievement when you get, a company that might have been stagnant with, however many employees,
Yeah.
humans that may have been living, below their, excitement level to all jazzed up to now instead of everything is red tape everywhere they go, they can't change anything to having a company asking, how might we? Because I just think it's just such a powerful inquiry that opens a channel to maybe we can't do it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can't.
Yeah.
Let's just take a moment and look at all possible scenarios, and then we can say we can.
People really get locked in on those constraints. And if you try to tell them, like, we'll set that aside, they can't. Like, like they're so bought into this notion that, like, it's not that I'm a failure, it's this thing is standing in the way, and you don't seem willing to accept that. So I just have to dig in my heels. It's like a subconscious natural reaction. So I always say, like, it's very possible those constraints are immovable and very real. I'm not discounting them. Why don't we, just for a thought exercise, let's set it aside for a second. Let's pretend, the regulators wouldn't say you can't do that. So like, let's assume we could, let's start dreaming like, well, if we could do that, what would we do? And then it's like, you've made it safe for them. And it's like, okay, no, they hear me. Like, this is real. And I'm not just being difficult. We're just going to have this fun thought exercise that's ultimately going to be pointless because the constraints still there. It's like, okay, but let's just play. Like, let's come up with something. And then like they get so bought into the outcome that they then like desperately want to find a way around that constraint, or the outcome reveals that. I just had this the other day with my own staff where like there's something a regulator's telling us we have to do, and they built this whole like thing for our developers. You get to solve for XYZ, and then at the end of doing all that, the guy who's leading the charge is like, and then I realized actually we can already do that with our system. We just weren't thinking about using that piece of it in this way. But it's like he had to get to the end state to be like, oh yeah, we can do this. And then we didn't have to do anything. We had no development to do because we already had the pieces we need. We just hadn't been fitting them together in the way that ultimately we needed some freedom of thought to get through and see the end goal to be like, oh yeah, that thing over there could totally do this. So like we're good to go.
Bryan, thank you so much for coming on the Purpose Chasers. It is
And look, if I can be this passionate about insurance, imagine how much passion you can have for something, right? Like, how might we care about what we're working in and see the possibilities in it? And then, like, you can't help but be passionate and excited about it. So that's, I mean, talking about chase and purpose, right? Like, love what you're doing. And if you don't, how might you figure out what you would love and then chase that?